Hello everyone and welcome to the Wasteland deck list and review video. I do want to mention very early on that this is more what you would call the quote-unquote departed build that you might see as like the meta deck list. I am just calling it Wasteland though because kind of the more top end cards tend to be more Wasteland oriented, like Ice Shillandrig and Ilgano and Great Big Corpse and the Wretch, and even some newer cards still have the Wasteland attribute. So in order to try to keep them separate and kind of make sure people understand what I'm trying to explain, I'm going to in this video consider the meta departed build as quote-unquote Wasteland. So now that I've gotten that all out, again, I am very close to 100 subs, so if you do enjoy the videos and the explanations and whatnot and the gameplay videos, then by all means consider subscribing. But yeah, let's get into the deck list and then we'll go from there. Here's the deck list we'll be discussing today. This deck list is actually a meta deck, so you can kind of take this more seriously if you want to go to a more serious tournament. It did come in first in a 32-man tournament over in Japan during the Set 13 period. So starting from the beginning, we have 3 Dead to Rights, 1 Soul Conversion, 3 Ilgano Horror Astray, 3 Skeleton Dreamer, 1 Soul Strike, 3 Whispers of a Dream, 3 Kagero Swordbound Soul, 3 Gremory Death Teller, 2 Do Blame Duke and Dame, 3 Great Big Corpse, 3 Wretch, 3 Wretched Tryst, 3 Chris Beyond the Patch, 3 Ice Shillandrig Gilded Autocrat, 1 Odile Black Swan, and 2 Tartarus the Tormentors. For the Evolved deck, we have 2 Do Blame Duke and Dame, 3 Wretch, 3 Ice Shillandrig Gilded Autocrat, and 2 Tartarus the Tormentors. The idea of this deck is to get your Necrocharge count going up really quick, relatively quickly, between things like Whispers of a Dream, Ilgano, Wretch, Gremory Death Teller, and Kagero Swordbound Soul, and then you have some consistency with Tartarus the Tormentor to get back things like Ice Shillandrig when you check the top 2 cards of your deck, and with Tartarus' Evo, your main goal is to get something like Chris Beyond the Patch. And then you can summon back Odile Black Swan to potentially deal 10 damage on the opponent and 4 total to their board, and that should hopefully get close to, if not be the end of the game. But you can also resurrect back like Ice Shillandrig, Gilded Autocrat, or maybe in a worst case scenario, resurrect back the Wretch and then pay 1 to evolve him to Storm for 4 damage, and potentially even more damage if you have some bullet bikes on the field thanks to the Wretch or Skeleton Dreamer's Last Words. The 2 major cards that do a lot of the heavy lifting in this deck is Chris Beyond the Patch and Gremory Death Teller, especially since Gremory can be called back from the cemetery for 1 play point as long as you have Necrocharge 10 or more and you do not have another copy of her on the field already. The deck is just basically a lot of really solid good cards that just synergize well with each other, and they're kind of 50-50 departed and Wasteland attribute cards. So that's why it's kind of tough for me to say that they're technically departed, because a lot of the cards more fall into the Wasteland archetype. And so to me, departed is more when you have the top end of like Demon Lord Ektar. So because Demon Lord Ektar is not in this deck, I mentally consider this more of a Wasteland deck more than a departed deck. But at the end of the day, whatever you want to call it, it's a pretty solid deck. So let's get to the individual card reviews. And if you already are familiar with this deck and you want to just take this and run, then by all means, you don't have to follow the rest of the video for the explanations if you know what the cards do. But if you are kind of new or you just kind of want to hear me ramble of cards I love, then just keep watching the video. I'm starting this video with explaining Ice and his spell Dead to Rights and the Magic Train. He's a 5-cost 5/5 that on Fanfare, if you have no Magic Train token on your field, you get to summon one, and whenever he becomes engaged, each opponent has to discard a card. He evolves for 1, and on evolve, you get to discard a card to select 2 followers in your cemetery and add them back to your hand. And again, he still keeps the whenever this card becomes engaged, each opponent discards a card, and then during your turn, whenever a player discards a card, select an enemy follower on the field and engage it. The Magic Train is an amulet that has stats. It's a 5-cost 4/5, but it doesn't come with stats by default. You have to pay 1 play point and rest any number of followers that cost a total or 5 or more on your field to maneuver it, and when you maneuver it, it gains that 4/5 stats. It has rush, and on strike, it gets to select an engaged enemy follower on the field, destroy it, and give your leader 2 defense. I could go rambling on for the next 30 seconds to a minute about how good he is and all the great synergies the Train and Icy have together, but I think at this point, if you've been on my channel enough and you know the game, at least to any certain degree, then you know that Ice Shield and Drake is just kind of one of the de facto best cards for Abysscraft right now, and any deck you're building, you should really just kind of mentally consider if you want to run Ice in the deck. Ice also has a spell called Dead to Rights. That's a 1-cost spell that says for quick, you can select an enemy follower on the field and give it -2/-2, and if the enemy follower hits 0 defense, then it auto dies. And then it has another effect when it's in the cemetery where you can banish Dead to Rights and a copy of Ice Shield and Drake Gilded Autocrat to select an enemy follower on the field and engage it, which allows the Magic Train to pop it when it goes to attack with its strike effect. Just like with Ice, Dead to Rights is just a really solid spell that is a low cost quick, and so it's just usually run in any deck at 3 copies. Next is Soul Conversion. It's a 1-cost spell that at quick speed you can select a follower on your own field, destroy it, and draw 2 cards. It's only run at 1 copy because there's really only like one good, decent option to be able to destroy with Soul Conversion, and that's Il'gyno Horror Stray, and she is going to be right up next on this video, so let's get over to her next. Il'gyno Horror Stray is a 1-cost 1/1 follower that says on Fanfare, select a Wasteland follower that costs 3 or less on your cemetery, and if you have Necrocharge 10, you can summon it, and if you do, you banish her from the field. And her last word says, put this back into your EX area and bury the top card of your deck. In my opinion, the effects are a little unintuitive because the more late game effect is the actual Fanfare, and the more constant recurring effect is the last words, where usually for cards, the more constant recurring thing, it would be something like the Fanfare, because that's kind of the first thing, and then the last words might be more late game. But basically the way she plays is you kind of play her early on as just like a 1-cost 1/1 weenie. That's really nothing special, but whenever she dies, she goes back to your EX area and you just mill the top card of your deck, and she just basically never really leaves your essential hand because she's in the EX area, and so you just keep playing her over and over again, and you can use her to sacrifice for like Soul Conversion, or there's another card that'll come up soon called Great Pit Corpse. And then more mid to late game, when you hit Necrocharge 10, you can banish her, which stops the infinite loop, because when you banish her, last words don't trigger, so she's actually out of the game permanently, and then you get to play one of the other cards. It's called Wretch, but we'll get to it soon, but it's kind of the more late game card that can kind of storm for a good chunk of damage and still do a little bit of board control. And now that there's a lot more discarding and milling effects with like Gremory and Kagero, being able to get to Necrocharge 10 quickly for Il'gyno is actually relatively quick and feasible now. Like, it's more of a mid-game thing more than like a real late game option, so it kind of just speeds up the game even more to try to punch faster and harder to finish the game. Up next is Skeleton Dreamer. It's a 2-cost 2/3 follower that says whenever his stats increase, you get a Storm, so it can just attack on the turn it's played, and then its last words is you can summon a Bullet Bike token and bury the top card of your deck. So there's the burying to help increase your Necrocharge count, but the Bullet Bike can be used for later if you want to replay another Skeleton Dreamer to give the new Skeleton Dreamer +1 attack, which means it does gain attack or defense, so it gets Storm and can punch for on summon. And I suppose worst case scenario, if you did not find a Wretch, you could always summon back Skeleton Dreamer with Il'gyno as well, but it's just not the ideal card you'd want to res back. Next is 2 cards because they synergize well with each other and are basically meant for each other. It's Kagero, Swordbound Soul, and Soul Strike. Kagero is a 2-cost 2/2 follower that if you have Necrocharge 10, he has Rush and Bane, and his Fanfare effect says you can choose one of the following 2, select a Soul Strike in your cemetery and put it into your EX area, and if you have Necrocharge 20, it costs 2 less to play this turn, so it's essentially free, or you can bury the top 2 cards of your deck, which is the more early game option. Soul Strike is a 2-cost spell that says select an enemy follower on the field and deal it 4 damage, and if you have Necrocharge 20, you can also deal 4 damage to its leader. As you can probably tell based on the card art and the effects, they synergize well with each other, and Kagero can help, accelerate the Necrocharge as well with his Mill 2 Fanfare ability, so everything just seems to mill 2 really well this set. Next is the classic Whispers of a Dream. It's a simple 2-cost spell that says at quick, you can select an enemy follower that costs 3 or less on the field, destroy it, and bury the top card of your deck. The real strength of this card is just the fact that it doesn't matter what the stats are of the 3-cost or less follower that gets summoned. There can be some that have like pretty good defense, like Ancient Alchemist, that can have like 5 or 6 defense, and that doesn't really matter with Whispers of a Dream. It can still kill it easily. Whispers has just consistently been a really solid card, and because you do bury the top card of your deck, deck, it does still help with your necrocharge count, so definitely get a playset of this if you haven't already for the deck. Next is Gremry Death Teller. She's a 2-cost 2/3 that has Ward, and on Fanfare you bury the top 2 cards of your deck. And for 1 play point, if she's in the cemetery, you can summon this card from your cemetery and give it last words, banish this card, mainly so you don't just repeatedly keep summoning her back from the cemetery every turn all the time. And you can only activate this if there are at least 10 cards in your cemetery and there are no cards named Gremry Death Teller on your field. Gremry is the key card that really accelerates the milling of your deck, and not only because of her basic Fanfare, mill top 2 cards of your deck, but the fact that for half her cost you can just resurrect her back from the cemetery to just do it some more is just kind of insane. And granted, you have to have at least 10 cards in the cemetery, but there's so many cards that mill in this deck that getting to 10 is not hard. And having an extra Gremry on the field is not the end of the world, and it has Ward. Like, you can just defend yourself with it. It's just kind of a dumb card for this deck. Dumb in a good way, not in a bad way. Next up is Do Blame Duke and Dame. He's a 2-cost 2/2 that on Fanfare you bury the top card of your deck, so you got even more burying in the deck. He evolves for 1, and on evolve you can select an enemy follower on the field and deal it 2 damage, and if you have necrocharge 10 you deal 4 instead. So with all the other milling in the deck, it's probably not hard to hit necrocharge 10 relatively early on to deal 4 damage, so he kind of just synergizes really well with the deck. Up next is Great Pit Corpse. It's a 3-cost 3/3 follower that on Fanfare you can bury another card and select an enemy follower on the field and deal it 4 damage. And once per turn, when a 1-cost token card you control leaves the field, you get to summon a token of the exact same name. His main synergy is with Ilgano Horror Astray, because she's such a cheap cost follower that you can just kill her with the Fanfare effect, and then because of Ilgano's last word, she just goes back to your EX area and you mill a card, which also helps accelerate your necrocharge. So just, all great synergy overall. And worst case scenario, if you needed to, you could resurrect back Great Pit Corpse with Ilgano Horror Astray, because he has a 3-cost or less Wasteland follower, but he's not the greatest option in the world. But the option is there if you do need it. The real option for Ilgano's Fanfare effect is the Wretch. It's a 3-cost 3/2 follower that can evolve for 1, but only if it was summoned back from the cemetery. It does have Rush and Last Words to summon a Bullet Bike token and bury the top 2 cards of your deck. Its on evolve has Storm, and its on evolve effect says select an enemy follower on the field and deal it 5 damage, and it still retains the last words of summoning a Bullet Bike token and burying the top 2 cards of your deck. The Bullet Bike token can give a Wasteland follower +1 attack and Rush, and so if you do have 1 or 2 Bullet Bikes from previous Wretches or Skeleton Dreamers, the Wretch could come up to like a 5 or maybe 6 attack with Storm, so pretty solid, strong damage for 1 turn. Wretched Tryst is up next. It's a 4-cost spell that says select 2 Wasteland followers that cost 3 or less in your cemetery, and if you have necrocharge 10 you can summon them. Tryst can mainly be used to summon back either Wretch, Great Pit Corpse, or Ilgano Horror Astray, and there's a nice little combo you can do with the card where you can choose a Great Pit Corpse and a Ilgano Horror Astray to summon them both back from the cemetery, and then because both the Fanfare of Ilgano and Great Pit Corpse are pending at the same time, you can use Great Pit Corpse first to destroy Ilgano and send her to the cemetery to deal 4 damage, and then you could still choose to resolve either the Fanfare or Last Words of Ilgano at the same time. I would say choose the Last Words first to mill a card and put Ilgano back into the EX area, and then you can use the Fanfare ability of Ilgano to summon back a Wretch from the cemetery, and you don't have to banish Ilgano because she's not on the field to banish, but you can still just summon the Wretch back onto the field, and then you can still do subsequent pay 1 evo point to evolve the Wretch and storm with it for more damage. It gets a little weird just because there's a lot of multiple effects going on, and usually people aren't used to multiple effects going off at the same time and having to order certain effects over others, but as far as I can understand it, and as far as from past experience and everything, that does seem to be a legal play. It might be a little bit of a stretch where you don't do it every single game, but it is something to consider as you're trying to play Wretched Tryst and manage through all the Fanfare and Last Word abilities. Next up is Chris Beyond the Patch. He's a 4-cost 4/4 Departed Cutthroat follower that on Fanfare you can select an Abysscraft follower not named himself that costs 5 or less in your cemetery, and if you have necrocharge 10 you can summon it and give it ward. The main point of this card is to summon back either Odile Black Swan or Ice Shillindrake Gilded Autocrat, and with Odile you can storm for 10 damage to your opponent and deal 4 to all their opponent's followers, and Ice Shillindrake is obviously just solid because you do get the Mage Train back, and then you can pay 1 play play point to evolve it and, you know, get going with Ice Chill and Drake. And Chris is only a 4 cost where Ice is a 5 cost, so you could get him going 1 turn, like basically sooner than you normally would with just Ice Chill and Drake. You could always grab Chris back with Ice Chill and Drake as well, and then just keep replaying Chris over and over again to eventually maybe go to Odile, or if you just want to play Ice some more. So there's just a lot of flexible options with Chris, and the Chris is what kind of makes it nice, where it's not the end of the world if you do bury Ice Chill and Drake by accident by milling, because you can just play Chris and just get him back. And so prior to this, if Ice Chill and Drake was milled by accident, he was almost basically gone unless you played Grave Desecration, which no one normally would. The penultimate card for this deck is Odile Black Swan. It's a 5 cost 6/4 that on Fanfare you can deal 2 damage to each enemy leader and enemy follower on the field, and if you have Necrocharge 20 it has Storm, and then its strike effect says you can deal 2 damage to each enemy leader and enemy follower on the field. So because you do mill so much in this deck, and you can get to Necrocharge 20 relatively quickly, and once you get to Necrocharge 20 you can essentially deal 10 damage to your opponent and 4 damage to their board, because 2 damage to the leader and enemy followers on the field, and then the attack does 6 to the enemy leader, and then the strike effect deals 2 more damage to the leader and enemy follower. So that's where the 10 to the leader goes to, and the 4 to all the followers. If it's more early game and you haven't had a chance to get the Necrocharge 20 yet, you could also just pay 1 play point and maneuver with Odile to maneuver the Magic Train. So that's always an option. It's not what you want to do, but hey, if it's there, just don't forget that she has a 5 cost. And don't forget that the 2 damage to each enemy follower on the field gets around aura, because you're not targeting them with card effects, you are just dealing the damage. So don't think that aura followers are immune from her on strike and Fanfare effects. The last card in the deck is Tartarus the Tormentor. He's a 10 cost 7/7, which is expensive, but he normally costs 5 less to play if you have at least 15 departed cards in your cemetery, and this deck runs almost 30, so it should be relatively easy to hit 15. He evolves for 1, and on evolve he becomes an 8/8, and you can select a departed follower in your cemetery and summon it. He also has a act ability when it's in your hand, where you can pay 1 play point and put this card into the EX area to look at the top 2 cards of your deck, and you can reveal a departed card from among them and add it to your hand and bury the other card. There are a lot of departed cards in this deck, between Dead to Rights, Soul Conversion, Ilgano, Skeleton Dreamer, Soul Strike, Kagero, Great Pit Corpse, Wretch, Wretched Tryst, Chris Beyond the Patch, and Ice Chill and Drake. So with the top 2 cards of the deck, you're more than likely going to at least get 1 departed follower, and you could always just mill something like Gremory, so she's not really gone, because at some point you can pay 1 to bring her back to mill a couple more cards. And then late game you get to play him for 5 less, so essentially 5 play points, which is still enough where you can pay 1 play point to maneuver the Magic Train with Tartarus if you need to, and then you can evolve him. And kind of the best option for Tartarus in the deck is Chris Beyond the Patch, and so you can resurrect back Chris, and if you have Necrocharge 20 or more, you could bring back Odile Black Swan and have her swing for 10 to the leader and 4 to all the followers. So essentially for 6 play points, you know, 5 for Tartarus and 1 for the Evo, you get to summon Chris and then Odile. So essentially for 6 play points, you're getting like 15 play points worth of value, because you're getting 4 from Chris and 5 from Odile, and then obviously you're paying the 5 for Tartarus and the 1 for the Evo. So that's really good value and a lot of damage for the late game to try to close out the game. So there you have it, guys. Hope the deck list review and all the card reviews are helpful. If you have any questions, by all means leave a comment and I try to get to them if I can. And do feel free to subscribe if you appreciate the content. And I'm trying to get to 100 by the end of the year, which I think is pretty doable. We only have about 8 people left that would need to subscribe to get to 100, so that would be awesome. And otherwise, have a great holidays, guys. Bye.